Hello and welcome to Fayette County Public Library Storytime. Our first story today is Sylvester and the Magic Pebble. Sylvester Duncan lived with his mother and father at Acorn Road in Oatsdale. One of his hobbies was collecting pebbles of unusual shape and color. On a rainy Saturday during vacation, he found a quite extraordinary one. It was flaming red, shiny, and perfectly round like a marble. As he was studying this remarkable pebble, he began to shiver, probably from excitement, and the rain felt cold on his back. "I wish it would stop raining," he said. To his great surprise, the rain stopped. It didn't stop gradually as rain usually do. It ceased. The drops vanished on the way down. The clouds disappeared. Everything was dry, and the sun was shining as if rain had never existed. The Magic Pebble. In all his young life, Sylvester had never had a wish gratified so quickly. It struck him that magic must be at work, and he guessed that the magic must be in the remarkable-looking red pebble, where indeed it was. To make a test, he put the pebble on the ground and said, "I wish it would rain again." Nothing happened. But when he said the same thing, holding the pebble in his hoof, the sky turned black. There was lightning and a clap of thunder, and the rain came shooting down. "What a lucky day this is," thought Sylvester. "From now on, I can have anything I want. My father and mother can have anything they want. My relatives, my friends, and anybody at all can have everything anybody wants."
Oh no.
He wished the sunshine back in the sky, and he wished a wart on his left hind fetlock would disappear, and it did. And he started home, eager to amaze his father and mother with his magic pebble. He could hardly wait to see their faces. Maybe they wouldn't even believe him at first. As he was crossing Strawberry Hill, thinking of some of the many, many things he could wish for, he was startled to see a mean, hungry lion looking right at him from behind some tall grass. He was frightened. If he hadn't been so frightened, he could have made the lion disappear, or he could have wished himself safe at home with his father and mother. He could have wished the lion would turn into a butterfly, or a daisy, or a gnat. He could have wished many things, but he panicked and couldn't think carefully. "I wish I were a rock," he said, and he became a rock.
Oh no.
The lion came bounding over, sniffed the rock 100 times, walked around and around it, and went away confused, perplexed, puzzled, and bewildered. "I saw that little donkey as clear as day. Maybe I'm going crazy," he muttered. And there was Sylvester, a rock on Strawberry Hill, with the magic pebble lying right beside him on the ground, and he was unable to pick it up. "Oh, how I wish I were myself again," he thought, but nothing happened. He had to be touching the pebble to make the magic work, but there was nothing he could do about it. His thoughts began to race like mad. He was scared and worried. Being helpless, he felt hopeless. He imagined all the possibilities, and eventually he realized that his only chance of becoming himself again was for someone else to find the red pebble and to wish that the rock next to it would be a donkey. Someone would surely find the red pebble. It was so bright and shiny, but what on earth would make them wish that a rock were a donkey? The chance was 1 in a billion at best. Sylvester fell asleep. What else could he do? Night came with many stars. Meanwhile, back at home, Mr. and Mrs. Duncan paced the floor, frantic with worry. Sylvester had never come home later than dinner time. Where could he be? They stayed up all night wondering what had happened, expecting that Sylvester would surely turn up by morning. But he didn't, of course. Mrs. Duncan cried a lot, and Mr. Duncan did his best to soothe her. Both longed to have their dear son with them. "I will never scold Sylvester again as long as I live," said Mrs. Duncan, "no matter what he does." At dawn, they went about inquiring of all the neighbors. They talked to all the children, the puppies, the kittens, the coats, the piglets. No one had seen Sylvester since the day before yesterday. They went to the police. The police could not find their child. All the dogs in Oatsdale went searching for him. They sniffed behind every rock and tree and blade of grass, into every nook and gully of the neighborhood and beyond, but found not a scent of him. They sniffed the rock on Strawberry Hill, but it smelled like a rock. It didn't smell like Sylvester. After a month of searching the same places over and over again and inquiring of the same animals over and over again, Mr. and Mrs. Duncan no longer knew what to do. They concluded that something dreadful must have happened and that they would probably never see their son again, though all the time he was less than a mile away. They tried their best to be happy, to go about their usual ways, but their usual ways included Sylvester, and they were always reminded of him. They were miserable. Life had no meaning for them anymore. Sounds kind of hopeless, doesn't it?
But they know that he likes pebbles, so they'll probably find the pebble.
You think they'll figure it out?
I think they'll find a shiny pebble and probably put it at their house so they'll see it. Because they probably think he's lost or something.
Yeah. Well,
So
that's a
they'll
pretty
probably
good
see the
guess.
pebble. But that stick of grass and him is blocking the pebble's shininess, so they probably can't see it.
Mm-hmm. Night followed day and day followed night over and over again. Sylvester on the hill woke up less and less often. When he was awake, he was only hopeless and unhappy. Poor Sylvester. He felt he would be a rock forever, and he tried to get used to it. He went into an endless sleep. The days grew colder. Fall came with the leaves changing color. Then the leaves fell and the grass bent to the ground. Then it was winter. The winds blew this way and that. It snowed. Mostly the animals stayed indoors, living on the food they had stored up. One day, a wolf sat on the rock that was Sylvester's and howled because he was hungry. Then the snow melted. The earth warmed up in the spring sun and things budded. Leaves were on the trees again, and flowers showed their young faces. One day in May, Mr. Duncan insisted that his wife go with him on a picnic. "Let's cheer up," he said. "Let us try to live again and be happy, even though Sylvester, our angel, is no longer with us." They went to Strawberry Hill. Mrs. Duncan sat down on the rock. The warmth of his own mother sitting on him woke Sylvester up from his deep winter sleep. How he wanted to shout, "Mother! Father! It's me, Sylvester! I'm right here!" But he couldn't talk. He had no voice. He was stone dumb. Mr. Duncan walked aimlessly about while Mrs. Duncan set out the picnic food on the rock. Alfalfa sandwiches, pickled oats, sassafras salad, Timothy Compote. Suddenly, Mr. Duncan saw the red pebble. "What a fantastic pebble!" he exclaimed. Sylvester would have loved it for his collection. He put the pebble on the rock. They sat down to eat. Sylvester was now as wide awake as a donkey that was a rock could possibly be. Mrs. Duncan felt some mysterious excitement. "You know, Father," she said suddenly, "I have the strangest feeling that our dear Sylvester is still alive and not far away." "Well, I am, Sylvester wanted to shout, but he couldn't. If only he had realized that the pebble resting on his back was the magic pebble. "Oh, how I wish he were here with us on this lovely May day," said Mrs. Duncan. Mr. Duncan looked sadly at the ground. "Don't you wish it too, Father?" she said. He looked at her as if to say, "How can you ask such a question?" Mr. and Mrs. Duncan looked at each other with great sorrow. "I wish I were myself again. I wish I were my real self again," thought Sylvester. And in less than an instant, he was. You can imagine the scene that followed. The embraces, the kisses, the questions, the answers, the loving looks, and the fond exclamations. When they had eventually calmed down a bit and had gotten home, Mr. Duncan put the magic pebble in an iron safe. Someday they might want to use it, but really, for now, what more could they wish for? They all had all that they wanted. That's a pretty good story, don't you think?
Yeah. I do not want that pebble.
No.
Well, I want it, that's for sure.
I want it.
I just wish that I'm a superhero. And Lynx could wish that he had 4 arms like General Grievous, but
No.
yeah.
All right.
I have a feeling in the end you would be happy just to be you again.
Yes. Well, Sylvester had a problem, and he finally solved it at the end, didn't he? So today we're going to take a look at some pictures and see if you can figure out what the problem is between the two pictures. So here we have a flower, and we have its match, but something is missing. Can you tell me what's missing? Yes.
One of them has a leaf missing.
All right, the leaf is missing here. That's right. All right. Clayton, what's wrong with these two rocket ships? You see what's missing?
I can see it.
There's a window missing in the middle, and it's pink.
Right, the middle window is missing. All right, what about this stoplight? What's different about those two?
It's the right one has the green light and the other one doesn't.
Okay, it's missing its green
Well,
light.
That'd be hard. Slow down. Stop. Slow down again. Stop.
Okay, what about the mouse in the car? What's missing in this one? Can you tell us? Do you see what's missing?
I see it. His
Tail.
The tail's missing. All right.
And what is the chipmunk?
All right, Clayton, what about this little toy? What's missing?
There was water in the boat, and the right one has the duck, and the water is missing
Yeah,
on that side.
the duck is missing, right? All right, we got the clowns. What is different about those two clowns?
His cheeks are missing.
The cheeks, yes.
You guys have good eyes.
All right, what about this ball?
I already see it. The stars
All right, you found
the
that star
line.
pretty easy, right?
and the lines on the other
Oh,
side.
yeah, I just put them up backwards.
And it's
What about this happy little book? Can you see something missing?
It's missing a leg.
Yep, his foot's missing. We're about out of space. What about this submarine? What's missing there?
It's scope.
Yep, the
That'd be
periscope.
hard.
That's
Like
right.
you don't see the island, and then you're like going up, and then pow.
Okay, we're just going to do one more, and this is for anyone. What is wrong with this little dragon toy, dog toy, or whatever it is?
The signs are different
Yeah,
colors.
that's the hardest one I thought of all of them. That's very good. You guys solved a problem, didn't
That
you?
one I think was easy. Before any of us even said anything, my mind was saying to me, its eyes.
The eyes were different. That's
Because
right.
when I first looked at the dragon, the first thing I saw was its eyes, and then I watched the other dragon, and I was like,
There it is. All right. Well, the character in this story has a problem. And we got to figure out how she can solve it. Okay? It's called What to Do, What to Do. When you guys have a problem, you probably say that. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? So she's going to have a problem, and she's going to solve it in a unique way. Old Sophie lived all alone. Her days were long and lonely. She talked to her cow. She talked to her cabbages. She talked to her pots and her pans and her flowers and her furniture. But of course, she got no answer. Every day, Sophie put on her bright orange hat and her shawl with floppy fringe and went to the well for water. One morning, she saw some birds nearby. Nice birdies, sweet birdies, called Sophie. And they seemed to call back, nice lady, sweet lady. Sophie was delighted, and all that flutter she ran back to the cottage. I'll feed them, she said. Sophie baked bread as sweet as a cake and as golden as the setting sun. She scattered crumbs all around and waited. The birds came flocking. Nice lady, sweet lady, they twittered and tweeted. They perched on Sophie's shoulder and they ate from her hand, and Sophie loved it. Sophie baked more bread. The birds called their friends and they came a-flocking. They sat on Sophie's hat and squeezed onto her shoulders. They picked and they pecked and they gobbled up every crumb. Soon birds from all over knew the old woman who wore a bright orange hat and a shawl with floppy fringe. But there was no more nice lady, sweet lady. They filled the trees and lined the fence, screeching. They sat on the porch and paced the roof, squawking. They crowded poor Sophie and snatched and grabbed and quarreled over every morsel. Sophie scolded them gently. Now, no biting, no scratching, no shoving. But the birds paid no attention. They filled the air with their flapping wings and their caws and their hoots. It was noisy. There was never going to be enough bread. Sophie tried to keep the peace. She baked more and more, filling the air with a wonderful aroma. It floated over the countryside and all the way down to the village. The people sniffed the air and smiled. Who can be baking such sweet-smelling bread? They asked one another. Back at the cottage, Sophie had no smile. What she had was flour on her shoes, flour on her floor, and flour on her elbows. She was weary of kneading and baking, but the greedy birds demanded more. Screech, squawk, caw, hoot. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? She thought. Please, Birdie, she pleaded, no pestering. Please, Birdie, she begged, no shouting. But the birds paid no attention. They followed Sophie everywhere. They followed her when she went to milk her cow, when she went to tend her garden. They flowered her when she went to the village for more flour. What to do? What to do? Sophie worried every step of the way. When the people saw Sophie with her large sack of flour, one of them asked, do you bake the bread that fills the air with such sweet smells? Why, yes, said Sophie. I bake bread for the birds. Would you bake bread for us too? Asked a child. Sophie looked up. The birds circled impatiently overhead. I'm sorry, said Sophie. I can hardly keep up with the birds, and she hurried on her way. All the birds followed her. What to do? What to do? Shortly, Sophie saw a wagon coming down the road with a sign that said, Too many problems? Don't you know what to do? Ask Velma, seer, sage, and confidential advisor. Leaning from the wagon was Velma herself. "Tell your fortune, good mother," she crooned. "Solve your problem, step right in." "I think I will," said Sophie. Velma got right down to business. "What ails you, dearie? You have warts or corns? A nasty bee sting?" "No," said Sophie. "A lazy husband or a naughty child?" "No," said Sophie. "Well, what then?" demanded Velma. "I haven't got all day." Poor Sophie's words came out in a tumble. "Birds and bread, peck and shoo, squeak and squawk, what should I do?" Velma made no sense of that, but it didn't matter. "Oh, a terrible problem," she wailed. "Lucky for you, I'm a bird expert." And to herself she thought, "This is a cuckoo. I know a cuckoo when I see one." "I will consult the crystal," she said importantly and peering into the glass ball. "Aha! The crystal says, I need all your gold." "But I have no gold," said Sophie. "Then it says, I need all your silver." "But I don't have any silver," said Sophie. Velma was in a hurry. She banged on the table. "Well, what do you have?" she snapped. Sophie looked at Velma and she did not see a seer. She did not see a sage. She did not see a confidential advisor. What she saw was a very greedy lady. "Just like those birds," thought Sophie. And right then, Sophie knew what to do. How's she going to solve her problem? Let's see what she does. "I have a beautiful orange hat and a shawl with fine floppy fringe," said Sophie. "Well, that will have to do," said Velma. Just for show, she did a quick hocus pocus and a hasty alakazam, and Sophie just listened. Then Velma hustled Sophie out of the door and snatched her hat and her shawl. She climbed under her wagon and gave the mule a whack and rolled out of sight, with her hat and her fringe flapping in the wind. You know what's going to happen? And the birds followed Velma, right? Because she's got the orange hat and the floppy fringed. And there goes Sophie. As soon as Sophie heard the last caw and the hoot, she picked up her sack of flour and hurried home. She went right to baking. She made pies and cookies and tarts and sweet rolls and, of course, her wonderful golden bread. Sophie hung a sign in the village. "All welcome for baked goods, Mondays and Fridays only. On other days, stop by and visit, but bring your own bread." How do you do? Were asked and told, tea was served and bread was sold, friends were made as good as gold, and Sophie was never lonely again. Pretty good story. What to do?
Yeah, did you like that?
Yeah, because at the beginning it said they knew her by her hat and all her shiny clothes.
Right.
So she gave that away.
She gave it away, and the birds followed her.
And the birds didn't even smell the bread. They just recognized her, so they were like.
Nope. She had a real problem, didn't she?
Mm-hmm.
Well, this boy has a problem too. The name of this book is Stuck. It all began when Floyd's kite became stuck in a tree. He tried pulling and swinging, but it wouldn't come unstuck. What would you do if your kite was stuck in a tree?
I'd climb up it and just push it out.
Well, it looks like on this tree the branches are too far up, so he can't get there.
Yep, do you see he's hanging on that and just climb up the rope?
Oh.
Yeah.
That's a bad idea because if it gets unstuck.
Yeah, that
The trouble really began when he threw his favorite shoe to knock the kite loose. And that got stuck too.
I think he should wait till winter. Yeah, Yeah, that's what Charlie Brown did. He flew his kite during winter.
So he threw up his other shoe to knock down his favorite one. And unbelievable, that got stuck as well. So in order to knock down his other shoe, Floyd fetched Mitch.
And Mitch will break his kite.
I've heard a few stories about cats and trees, haven't you?
Yeah.
I think we know what's going to happen.
No, everyone's.
Cats get stuck in trees all the time, but this was getting ridiculous. So Floyd fetched a ladder. He was going to sort this out once and for all.
The ladder will get stuck or he will fall.
Well, if you had a ladder, what would you do with it?
Climb up the tree.
Well, you would lean it up against the trunk of the tree, right? And then climb up the ladder, right? Well, this is what he did. Up he threw it. And I'm sure you can guess what happened.
It got stuck.
If he puts enough stuff, it's just going to fall on him.
The ladder was borrowed from a neighbor and would definitely need to be put back before anyone noticed. And in order to do so, Floyd flung a bucket of paint at it. And wouldn't you know it, the bucket of paint got stuck. So then Floyd tried a duck to knock down the bucket of paint.
That's not going to work.
And a chair to knock down the duck. And his friend's bicycle to knock down the chair. The kitchen sink to knock down his friend's bicycle. Floyd's front door to knock down the kitchen sink. The family car to knock down the front door. The milkman to knock down the family car. An orangutan to knock down the milkman, who surely had somewhere else to be.
In the tree.
A small boat to knock down the orangutan. A big boat to knock down the small boat. A rhinoceros to knock down the big boat. A long-distance truck to knock down the rhinoceros. The house across the street?
This is getting bigger and bigger. Yeah, how can he pick up that?
That was my question a long time ago.
Like, how can he pick up like an orangutan, a mailman?
Anyway, he tried to use the house to knock down the long-distance truck. And he tried a lighthouse to knock down the house no longer across the street. And then there's this whale who says, "Hi, what are you doing?" The curious whale, in the wrong place, at the wrong time, to knock down the lighthouse. And they all got stuck.
That's amazing how all that stuff got stuck in there.
Just to knock down his one kite.
A fire engine was passing and heard all the commotion. The firemen stopped to see if they could help at all. And up they went. First the engine. "Can we help at all?" Followed by the firemen, one by one.
Wow.
That goofy boy. And there they stayed, stuck between the orangutan and one of the boats. Firemen would definitely be noticed missing, and Floyd knew he'd be in big, big trouble. So then he had an idea,
I have an idea.
and he went to find a saw. He lined it up as best he could and hurled it up into the tree, and that was it. There was no more room for anything else. That night, Floyd fell asleep exhausted, though there was not a thing he could do, but it felt like he was forgetting something. What do you think he was forgetting?
Everything else in the city.
Okay, well, we're glad you joined us today for our story time. We just like to say goodbye.